Well, hello friends, and welcome to Ask Zach. Today we're going to talk about one of the consummate chameleon guitar players that have come through Nashville, and that's Steve Gibson. He's one of my favorites, and you've heard him on everything from I'd Really Love to See You Tonight, playing those great guitar solos on that, to tracks by Randy Travis, like Hard Rock Bottom of My Heart, where he's using a Bigsby palm bender. Or tracks, by Patty Loveless, like Lying, Cheating, No Good, Two-Time, Double Dealing, Loving Heart, or all these tracks, by Reba McEntire, or even Buck Owens, playing on some of Buck Owens' stuff that he recorded after Streets of Bakersfield was a hit with as a duet with he and Dwight Yoakam. Yeah, Steve has just been one of these guys that he could, play with everyone from Reba McEntire to Ricky Skaggs and play with, along with Albert Lee or whoever else, or play on a Vince Gill album, or go to England and play with George Harrison. There was an album that George Harrison was producing for the band Splinter, and Steve Gibson played for George Harrison over there. And in fact, George Harrison nicknamed him Clark Kent because Steve has always kind of been known for, kind of being more dressed up, being, wearing a sport coat most of the time. So we're going to talk about Steve Gibson. While you're thinking about it, if you've been enjoying the show and you haven't done it yet, please hit subscribe. If you've already done that, then I really appreciate you supporting the show, and there's multiple ways. Probably the best is Patreon, and the link is in the description. There's also merch, like this amp schematic shirt, or there's tip jar information in the description below. So I appreciate that. All right, Steve Gibson was born outside of Peoria, Illinois, and he moved to Nashville after kind of, learning about recording and playing live in the Peoria area, and he had gotten an offer from a Nashville act to tour with them. And he spoke with his mentor, and Steve was very excited about the amount of money that he could make a week playing with this act. And his mentor told him, well, guess what? You could make that amount of money in a day doing session work. So why don't you move to Nashville, and instead of being a road guy, why don't you get into session work? So in 1972, Steve Gibson moved to Nashville. At the time, he had a Strat and a Tele and an SG, and he moved here and immediately started making inroads. And there was, of course, there was hard work and luck and all those things involved. And in a matter of years, he was playing on hit records. He was playing on B.J. Thomas's, Hey, Won't You Play Another Somebody Done Somebody Wrong song, to the aforementioned I'd Really Love to See You Tonight by England Dan and John Ford Coley. All sorts of, what was being called adult contemporary at that point. And he really got into that scene, besides also playing with, very established country acts, everything, from George Jones to Lynn Anderson. In fact, he even produced an album or two for Lynn Anderson. Then in the early 80s, as the adult contemporary scene kind of died off, he started playing on more and more country sessions and getting more ingrained in that. And he played on the huge John Anderson hit Swinging, or Swingin', if you prefer. I'm going to pick up my little list here that fell down. So, yeah. Also, just to mention a couple more of the kind of adult contemporary tunes that he played on that were big hits would be like Dave Loggins' Please Come to Boston, or, you have Michael Johnson's Bluer Than Blue. So those were some of those. But then he moved on to playing on a lot of country albums, and while he had done all this adult contemporary work, then he started playing on all of this, back to basics country, like Randy Travis, who was a neo-traditionalist, and he played on many of those hits. Probably one of the best examples is the Hard Rock Bottom of Your Heart, where he plays this beautiful Bigsby palm bender thing on a Tele, And he was really, really great at using that. He had it set up to where it would do it would bend the B string and the G string, and of course you just move it with your palm. And he's really a master of that. His one regret is, of course, using too much chorus during this period of time, which I think a lot of people were guilty of, and he wished that he had taken that off. But chorus aside, it is a beautiful solo. And he continued to get also into production. He began working with acts like McBride and the Ride or Aaron Tippin and on, and continued to do session work into the 90s. He played on most of the hits of Patti Loveless. I mentioned again the palm bender work on some of Patti's work, and the thing I played at the intro was another Patti Loveless track that was called "Hurt Me Bad in a Real Good Way." And I just thought that was a really fantastic way of taking chord shapes and arpeggios and playing an interesting intro part. And I'll do that as a lesson on my Patreon. So if you're interested in that, check that out. But he continued to work with a wide variety of artists, and also was just as well known as an acoustic player as an electric. And so if you think about or if you've ever heard any of the George Strait hits over the last 25 years, or actually probably closer to 30 years, most of the acoustic guitar work was Steve Gibson. So it was kind of a guitar duo of Steve Gibson and Brent Mason that have played on most of the post-1990 the work that's been produced by Tony Brown. So that's featured Brent Mason usually in the electric chair and Steve usually on acoustic, though sometimes they will rotate out. So, with producing and playing session work, then the next kind of major thing that came along was Pete Fisher, who was the manager of the Grand Ole Opry, asked Steve to come and kind of help update the Opry. And so they needed to have some musicians on the Opry that could play a wider variety of music because the music was changing. And so all of a sudden you needed some more versatile players that could cover everything from what was current at that point to also be able to play with someone like Little Jimmy Dickens or the Whites or any of these other acts. So he did that. He upgraded the quality of the music, the quality of the recordings that you heard coming off the Opry. He digitized a lot of the archives of old Opry performances, and also started becoming he became the musical director for the CMA Awards and also other television events like the CMA Christmas show. That's all Steve Gibson. That's him, calling the shots on the music. He's the one, hiring the players and telling people what to play and being in charge of charts and all those things. And so he's made a huge impact on the music that you hear. That the music, if you listen to country music or even that adult contemporary from the 70s, a lot of those are big hits. You have heard Steve Gibson and you didn't know it. And I think one of the things that has given him such an amazingly long and successful career is his versatility and the fact that he was the type of session player that didn't have such a strong stamp of what he did. He was a chameleon, and so he always just played what was required and wasn't one of those session stars that always puts his stamp on everything. And so he just played what the song required and always got a variety of different great tones. And and that's why he's had such a long career. I really, it was kind of a chance thing. Just last night, I saw Steve at a Country Music Hall of Fame event, and it was a real pleasure to get to reconnect with him. Of course, I met him through working with Brad Paisley on the Opry, and he was such a joy to work with. And then I interviewed him for the Truetone Lounge, and he's just someone that I have a world of respect for. I've created a Spotify playlist that really gives you a good variety. I love the fact that he played, there's a Ricky Skaggs track called Hummingbird, which has a really fast lick on it. Well, that's him playing the intro lick, and then Albert Lee plays the solo. But it's funny in that, you know, Albert doesn't play the main lick for the tune. It's actually Steve Gibson, or, you know, it's Steve Gibson playing on Reba's, you know, Is There Life Out There, which is this great kind of, you know, distorted strat, you know, kind of 90s solo, which, you know, kind of LA sounding. And he, you know, did as great a job on that as he did with Ricky Skaggs or the Dirt Band or all sorts of other things, other, you know, artists that he's played with. Gear-wise, you know, of course, in the 80s, he had a big rack, but also he really used a pair of silver face Fender amps, deluxes that had JBLs in them, and he used a Strat a lot with a Roland Dimension unit, the rack unit, not the pedal, that had the push buttons on it. He used that along with an Echoplex, and that is a lot of what you hear in the 80s and 90s for him, was, you know, the two deluxes with JBLs, and you know, usually he had a mid-50s Strat. It's a beautiful guitar that he's, you know, used all through the 70s, 80s, and still owns the guitar. He also owns a 58 Tele. That's the one that has the Bigsby palm benders on it, and you know, of course, 335s and all sorts of guitars that he's used on different tracks through the years. Just a beautiful, you know, guitarist, and a great guy, and someone that's always easy to be around. So today is a tribute to Steve Gibson, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.